Raketten op Tel Aviv, raketten op de Gazastrook. Komt er ooit vrede in het Midden-Oosten? Ook deze week zijn er weer tientallen doden gevallen door raketaanvallen van Israël en Hamas. Het lijkt een strijd zonder uitweg, maar is er een oplossing denkbaar? Aan de hand van 4 thema's praten we vandaag daarover met een bijzondere gast, Haim Divon, ambassadeur van Israël. Mr. Ambassador, we're very honored to have you here. De interviews worden gedaan door studenten van blok 2a. Elk thema leiden we in met een korte reportage. Natuurlijk maken we eerst kennis met de ambassadeur. Wie is hij, wat doet hij en wat kan hij vanuit Nederland betekenen voor zijn land in het conflict met de Palestijnen? Wat is eigenlijk de kern van het probleem? We zoomen daarvoor in op de Palestijnse kwestie. Nederland heeft altijd al een bijzondere verhouding gehad met Israël. Maar hoe sterk zijn de vriendschapsbanden eigenlijk nog? En Amerika. Obama blijft president. Brengt dat een oplossing voor het conflict dichterbij? Of juist niet? Israël ligt ook in de clinch met Iran. Over en weer zijn er dreigementen om een aanval te beginnen. Hoe serieus moeten we deze dreigementen nemen? Zal de bom ooit barsten? Voordat we het daarover gaan hebben, maken we eerst kennis met de ambassadeur. Haim Divon was eerst ambassadeur werkzaam in Ethiopië en Canada. Hij werd onder andere bekend van het opzetten van een luchtbrug tussen Ethiopië en Israël. De drijfveer voor de ambassadeur uit dit roerige land, het Joodse ideaal, Tikkun Olam. Om erachter te komen wat dit is, volgden we de ambassadeur bij de Yad Vashem-uitreiking in Amsterdam.
This is very special to honor such brave people, to honor people that not only saved lives, but inspired so many of us that in spite of the dark days, there's hope.
De Israëlische ambassadeur doet uiteraard meer dan onderscheidingen uitreiken en handen schudden. Haim Divon werkt vanuit Nederland aan het herstellen en volmaken van de wereld, volgens het Joodse gezegde Tikkun Olam.
Tikkun Olam is een heel centraal Joods begrip, alhoewel het niet zo vreselijk duidelijk in de Torah, in de Bijbel beschreven staat, maar het is wel de grondslag van de Bijbel. Tikkun Olam betekent het verbeteren, het vervolmaken van de wereld. De schepping is dus niet volmaakt, omdat wij ervan uitgaan dat God ons een bepaalde belangrijke rol wil geven in die vervolmaking van de wereld.
Net als Haim Divon houdt het CIDI zich vanuit Nederland bezig met Israël. Hoe moeilijk is het om vanuit ons land de situatie in Israël te verbeteren?
Nou, in Israël krijgen wij natuurlijk niks voor elkaar. Wij hebben veel meer een taak om het Nederlandse publiek hier te informeren over wat daar gaande is. We zouden het zo graag willen doen, maar die illusie hebben we niet. Nee.
Israël kan het paradijs zijn op aarde.
If you'll go to Tel Aviv, you'll see that Tel Aviv is just as lively, if not more than Amsterdam. If you go to Tel Aviv, you'll see, wow, the nightlife there, cultural life, etc. is amazing. So we have it all. We have the spiritual, we have the historical, we have the the current, we have the beach, and so it's great. And ask people who have been in Israel, they'll tell you, wow, don't miss the opportunity.
I saw the rockets falling right there, approximately about maybe 700-800 meters into the water.
Maar de hel kan op elk moment losbarsten.
Mr. Ambassador, would you still advise people to go to Tel Aviv?
Absolutely. Yesterday we reached the ceasefire. Things are back to normal, and Tel Aviv is the place to go.
So it's safe there now?
Absolutely.
As ambassador, you have a very important role in this conflict. How was your week?
Oh, very difficult, of course. I mean, first of all, we think of all the people in Israel, in the shelters, being under rocket attacks, but still the spirits were very high and strong, and they were all very happy that now it is came to an end.
And what is the most important thing you've been able to contribute this week?
Well, first of all, to explain the situation, to explain the background, because when you read the headlines, and you all as journalists, you have a very important role, and I felt that people are not fully aware of what happened, why it happened, why now, why we're doing what we have to do. So I was able to communicate with government, with parliamentarians, with the media, with Jewish community and other friends of Israel who wanted to know what's happening, what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm. And in the report we talked about a Jewish ideal, which is also important for you, Tikkun Olam. As ambassador of Israel and a follower of Judaism, how will the world look like when Tikkun Olam is reached?
Well, Tikkun Olam is something that each and every one of us have to try and exercise, whether you are a Jew or non-Jew. I mean, what it is to repair the world, to have a better world in terms of relations with one another, relations with the environment, trying to understand one another, to breach the different cultures. This is Tikkun Olam, to have a better world for the future for you guys. I'm already, the older generation, but you're the younger generation, to step into a world that will be without any conflicts, with caring about the environment. This is Tikkun Olam.
And what is necessary to achieve Tikkun Olam? Because we look at the world right now, and especially the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, it's more like a fairy tale.
So it means that we have a lot of work to do, and we shouldn't give up. And let's not forget that the Palestinian-Israeli conflict is just one of the conflicts. It is certainly well featured, but is it the only conflict? This is the most important conflict? I can name you a list of conflicts which are not being at the headlines, and you as journalists, future journalists, you have to ask yourself why. Why actually we are focusing only one has to be solved. It's important, but certainly not the most serious one. I mean, just see what's happening in Syria, a neighboring country, on a daily basis. More casualties in one day than the entire conflict between us and the Palestinians. How many headlines?
The Israeli-Palestinian conflict is a very long conflict, so...
Oh yes, but I can name you conflicts which are much longer. But still, not that I'm saying that it has to be solved, but proportions. Why this is in the focus? Why? And if we'll have time, I'll be more than happy to go into that. But I think you as future journalists, this is one of the things that you have to ask yourselves.
Okay. And how does it affect you personally? You probably have family there in Israel. You've been born there.
We have family. We are Israelis, and it is. What are the alternatives? What is the alternative for us? Of course, we want to achieve peace. We want to put the conflict behind us. Our Prime Minister is asking day and night, Mr. Abbas, let's return to the negotiating table. Let's sit down and talk. And unfortunately, that not only that is not happening. We are being hit by rockets from Gaza. So what is the alternative? Tell us, what is the alternative? What should we do? Because one thing we are not going to do, we are not going to pack up and leave. So this option is off the table. So they are there to stay. We have to be strong. Some people don't like it that we are strong, but if we wouldn't have been strong, you wouldn't have had an Israeli ambassador to interview.
So you think Tikkun Olam will actually be reached finally?
If we, all of us, and especially us Israelis, if we wouldn't have been optimistic that one day it will happen, we wouldn't have been there. We are optimistic.
And they are optimistic?
Oh yes, because what you don't know, for example, is that there's a lot of cooperation between us and the Palestinians. A lot of cooperation in many fields. We know one another better than so many others, and we know that it is reachable. So therefore we are optimistic because we know them, they know us. We talk to one another. Yes, there are some differences, but we talk to one another, and we believe that it is achievable. However, we have to work at it even harder.
And will you ever experience Tikkun? Will you experience peace in the Middle East?
Well, when we signed peace agreement with Egypt, we thought it's a mirage, a fata morgana. We didn't believe that it will happen during our time. It did. We signed an agreement with Jordan, with King Hussein. When it happened, we just didn't believe that it's happening. So everything is possible. In our region, as crazy as it is, everything is possible, and you have to remain optimistic.
So you think I will experience it too?
I hope so. I hope so. And I hope that as a future journalist, you'll be able not only to experience it, but to report about it.
Okay.
And to be there when we sign the agreement between us and the Palestinians that we put the conflict behind us.
So no fairy tale?
It shouldn't be a fairy tale.
Okay, and if you have to choose an embassy, well, don't you like to be better at the USA or Egypt now? More influence to the conflict at the embassy?
To speak to them?
Yes.
Well, first of all, we speak to them. But the people who are speaking to the Egyptians now, and the Americans, we're doing it on a regular basis. It is being done in Jerusalem, it is being done in Cairo, it is being done in Washington. And if we wouldn't have had those discussions, there wouldn't have been ceasefire. Because if you how the ceasefire came about? With the intervention of the Americans, the Egyptians, and the Israelis. Hamas were on the other side, and they were able to broker the deal. So we have a ceasefire. This is one step, a positive step which took place. So we can be a little bit optimistic, cautiously, but still optimistic.
So they will help you through your allies, actually.
Well, always we have allies, and this is important, that we know that we are not alone, and that's important. But at the same time, in this neighborhood, you have to see who you can speak to, who you can have a deal with, who are your potential allies, because sometimes, you hear very inflammatory rhetoric, but underneath the table, inside doors, there's a lot of negotiations and discussions. This is very typical to diplomacy, and certainly to diplomacy in our region.
Mm-hmm. So with Tikkun Olam, the spirit of Tikkun Olam, everything will be managed.
Tikkun Olam is a goal, is a spiritual goal, and it is also a tangible goal. And we hope that the spiritual goal that we should achieve, or we should strive for, should always be there. Let's remember that all of us are here to have a better world. And each and every one of us should contribute toward this goal.
Okay, for the better world then.
For a better world.
Well, thank you very much.
You're most welcome.
Het was vandaag rustig in Israël en de Gazastrook. Het staakt het vuren heeft stand gehouden. Israël en Hamas bestookten elkaar met de afgelopen week met raketten, met als gevolg veel burgerdoden. Wie de actualiteit volgt, ziet iedere dag schokkende beelden uit Israël en de Gazastrook voorbij komen. Maar waar gaat deze ingewikkelde kwestie nu echt over?
De schokkende beelden vanuit Gaza en Israël staan bij velen op het netvlies gebrand. De kern van het probleem ligt niet zozeer bij de escalatie, het komt voort uit een jarenlange strijd over grondgebied. In 1947 creëerden de Verenigde Naties de staat Israël, door Israëli's en Palestijnen eigen gebieden toe te wijzen. Een omstreden besluit dat voor Israël tot conflicten met de Arabische buurlanden heeft geleid, waaronder 20 jaar later de Zesdaagse Oorlog. Sindsdien bezet Israël Palestijnse gebieden, waarin ze Israëlische nederzettingen hebben gebouwd. Daardoor is van het oorspronkelijke VN-plan weinig terug te zien.
Israël is nog steeds de bezetter van de Gazastrook. En als bezetter hebben ze de plicht in internationale recht om deze mensen te beschermen, om alle burgers te beschermen. En dat beschermen ze niet, integendeels, vallen ze gewoon aan.
De zogenoemde bezetting is volgens de Palestijnse Gada Zaidan de kern van het probleem. De kwestie ligt volgens haar dieper dan de recente ontwikkelingen in Gaza.
The issue is not an issue of rockets, and it's not an issue of Israel only defending its citizens. What Israel is doing, it is defending its occupation. It's defending itself as an occupier. What Palestinians want is not too much. What Palestinians want is only to be able to live as free as any other nation. They want to be able to have their children grow up in a normal way, and that is made impossible through the occupation.
Diplomatie heeft niet gewerkt. Een vreedzame oplossing ook niet. Volgens Gada Zaidan is de gewelddadige oplossing moreel niet te accepteren. Wat blijft er dan nog over?
My question to the Israelis and my question to the international community is, how can the Palestinians get their freedom and be able to live free in their own country like any other nation in the world? What do you expect from the Palestinians? Do you expect from us to live happy and accept our occupier and the occupation? What would you do if you were a citizen of Gaza today?
It's good news that there's ceasefire right now, but that doesn't address the causes of this conflict. What would your response be to the question Ms. Zaidan just asked? What would you do if you were a Palestinian living in Gaza?
Let us go to 2005. What happened in 2005? We left Gaza. We left Gaza, settlements, army. So there's no occupation, no settlements. And we were probably naive to think that if we live, and this is the problem of instability, occupation, presence, settlements, if we go out, we leave them behind, the settlements, the farms, the greenhouses, what they're going to do now, independent, without us, they will say, wow, we are now going to look after our own people, take this, what the Israelis left behind, build our economy, and start a new chapter in our life. Sounds logic, right? But it didn't happen. So we left, no occupation, no settlements. What did we get in return? Barrage of rockets. Barrage of rockets. So what would the lady that spoke before, what would she say when we are not there, we are out of Gaza, and the rockets keep coming, and we are exercising restraint, we are warning each and every one, we are going, it has to be stopped, our people are in the shelter, it's impossible, and the rockets are still going on. And therefore, one has to ask this question, actually, why? Why the rockets keep going? Why do we hear this rhetoric that the many Palestinians, many in the Arab world, do not accept the right of Israel to exist? It's not a question of settlements.
If I could just interject, Mr. Ambassador,
Please.
As I understand it, you're saying that there are no more Israeli settlements
In Gaza.
in Gaza.
Yes.
Okay,
So-
but there are still settlements on land that.
But the conflict now was in Gaza. So if it is because of settlements, there are no settlements in Gaza. There's no Israeli military presence in Gaza. There's no occupation of Gaza. So what was the reason for the shelling, for the bombardment? And when you read the rhetoric of Hamas and other elements within the Arab world, you find the core of the issue, which is not settlements, which is not occupation. It's still the fact that they do not accept a Jewish state in the region. And it didn't start 7 years ago. It started in 1947. What happened in 1947? Have you heard of the partition resolution? There was a partition resolution of the UN, not Israel. UN decided, partition resolution, there will be a Jewish state and an Israeli state and a Palestinian state. Side by side, fine, the Israelis then, 1947, 48, went to the street to celebrate. Finally, at least there's a recognition after the Second World War, after the Holocaust, to have a Jewish state. And what was the reaction of the Arab world? Invasion.
They attacked. Then in 1967, there was another UN resolution. It's 45 years ago.
Why you skip the attack? They attacked not because there were settlements, not because there was any dispute of land. They attacked because they thought that a small community of 600,000 people will not be able to stand 7 armies. I mean, that was a small Jewish community of 600,000 people, hardly any arms. And the logic thing is, we'll just invade and we'll push them into the sea. That was the idea. So don't skip this chapter so fast, because this is the essence. This is the essence. Until there's acceptance of a Jewish state, and some do and some don't, unfortunately. So therefore, we have to be strong. And therefore, but this is the core of the problem, because if a Palestinian state would have been endorsed by the Palestinian and the Arab world, then in 47, and they didn't. And they didn't. Just think about that. Palestinian state, Jewish state, 1947, what is the reaction? Invasion. And those of you who have been into Israel, I mean, the Egyptian army reached Jerusalem, not just the Jordanian army.
We would not want to dispute that there is a lot of history there, a lot of very painful history.
But no, this is the core of the problem. It's not just history. I'm not here to lecture about history. I'm trying to explain what is the core of the problem. And if you ask, okay, why? Some of the explanation is that many still do not want to see a country, a democracy, that is carrying values, Western values, in that part of the world.
That are the Palestinians not now striving for a state?
Oh, they do, of course. And therefore we say, let's sit down and talk. We want to sit down with Abu Mazen. Our Prime Minister is telling him time and again, let us sit down. We are not putting as a precondition to Abu Mazen, listen, we would be more than happy to sit down with you, but we want reassurances that you'll be able to deliver Gaza. He is not, because he cannot set, a Palestinian leader cannot enter Gaza, because it's Hamas, they disregard him. But we are not bringing it up as an excuse to say, you know what, until you deliver Gaza, we are not going to talk to you. Say, no, let us talk, let us sit down. We know what are the core issues. Let us discuss them. Both sides have to take painful decision. For whatever reasons, Abu Mazen decided, I want to skip the stage of sitting around the table because it is it's a give and take. I don't want to be written down the history as someone who gave the right of return, for example. Therefore, I'm preferring to go to the UN. UN, there's automatic majority to every anti-Israeli resolution. There will be absolutely automatic majority because of the League of the Arab States, Muslim states, etc., a non-alignment movement, which unfortunately support them automatically. And therefore, he decided to opt to this route, while we are saying him, please, let's sit down and talk. If the talks, which will be, everyone will be monitoring, the Americans, the EU, the Russians, etc., will say, wait a minute, someone is bluffing, it will come out. But why don't give that a try? Why don't give that a try to sit down and to avoid clashes? And again, and we know that he cannot deliver Gaza, but still we acknowledge that he is one of the leaders of the Palestinians, and we want to sit down and talk to him because he's willing to sit down and talk to us. At least in the past, Hamas were not willing to sit down and talk.
But Israel is against Abbas, Abu Mazen, and his Fatah Authority to be recognized as a sovereign state by the UN.
No. Let me thank you for the question, which gives me an opportunity to clarify. We accept the principle of two-state solutions. So we know that the end result of any negotiation will be two-state solution. Palestinian state, Israeli state. But since there are so many issues that have to be discussed, and the Oslo Accord stipulate that the final agreement will be discussed around the negotiating table, we have to discuss Jerusalem, we have to discuss security arrangements, we have to discuss border, right of return.
Still a lot of work to be done.
Yeah, but okay, but you have to do it. You have to sit down and discuss.
That's all the time we have for now, Mr. Ambassador. Thank you very much.
We need 2 hours. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Nederland is van oorsprong een goede vriend van Israël. Kabinet na kabinet geeft al jarenlang de onvoorwaardelijke steun. Toch verandert er langzaam de publieke opinie. Zo spreekt oud-minister-president Dries van Acht zich zeer regelmatig kritisch uit over het Israëlische beleid. En samen met hem andere kopstukken uit het CDA. En er zijn meer organisaties die de relatie tussen Nederland en Israël bekritiseren.
Het conflict in Israël speelt zich ook af in Nederland. De Nederlandse regering kiest van oudsher de kant van de Israëlische regering. Maar er zijn ook organisaties die zich kritisch uitspreken over Israël. Een van die organisaties is een ander Joods geluid, waar Jaap Hamburger voorzitter van is. Hamburger, hier te zien als spreker op de Dam, legt uit waarom juist Israël nu de belangrijkste stap moet maken van toenadering.
Als er 2 partijen zijn die een conflict hebben en één van die partijen is in alle opzichten, en dat meen ik echt in alle opzichten, militair, politiek, diplomatiek, financieel, economisch, op inlichtingengebied, you name it, veruit de meerdere van de anderen, zoals Israël veruit de meerdere is van de Palestijnen, dan is het die sterkste partij die ook veruit de meeste mogelijkheden heeft om dat conflict te beëindigen.
Die sterkste partij doet echter het tegenovergestelde volgens Jaap Hamburger. Hoewel ook de Palestijnen regelmatig internationale afspraken aan hun laars lappen, doen de Israëlische machthebbers dit nog veel vaker.
De basis van alle schendingen is de bezetting. De bezetting van de Palestijnse gebieden, met inbegrip overigens van Gaza.
De Nederlandse regering ziet net als de andere vrienden van Israël echter geen reden die schending van het internationaal recht te veroordelen. Het lijkt een algemeen standpunt te delen met de rest van de EU. Het standpunt is volgens de critici achterhaald.
We zijn begonnen met te zeggen dat Israël het recht heeft zichzelf te verdedigen. Dat vind ik op zich dat is een waarheid als een koe, maar in deze context is het een leugen. Want Israël verdedigt zich hier niet, Israël valt aan. Wij steunen jullie. En in de marge willen wij wel eens een kritische opmerking maken. En ja, wij hopen dat jullie je daar wat van aantrekken, maar als het niet zo is, dan zal het de vriendschap niet aantasten. En als men al kritisch zou zijn, dan heeft Israël daar weinig mee op. Want men steekt in Israël in de zak wat men krijgen kan. En als er kritiek is, dan wendt men zich af.
Can you explain the importance of Holland towards Israel?
Well,
enjoyed, as of day one, very good relations. I think most governments have been very friendly. When I tour the Netherlands and I meet people, I would say most of them certainly are very friendly, even if we have some different of opinions, and this is legitimate. In Israel, you have different of opinions. Not everyone is agreeing with the government on A, B, or C. And therefore, since we have a lot of respect to the Netherlands, as a country that is one of the leading countries in Europe, with your very rich heritage, and so we attribute very special importance to our relations, and we are very pleased that we are able to have very good relations in all fields: economy and trade and culture and political dialogue, and we hope, and I'm sure it will continue this way.
Yes, the relationship is important, but it seems like Israel needs Holland as a companion in Europe. Why is this need?
A need is, I'm not so sure the need is the right word. Of course, we would like to have good relations with every country, and I think it's not a question of need, but question of, yes, we would like the leading countries in Europe to be in very special terms with us, because after all, the policies of Europe in general, of the EU, are being decided by the core group, even if it is behind the scene, but we know that there are 5-6 countries, and the Netherlands is among them. And we have, there's a big Jewish community here, which is very important for us. There are many Dutch people, Jews and non-Jews, who move to Israel and live in Israel. So the ties are much beyond just diplomatic relations. There's a very emotional, special relations, and I am doing my best in order to maintain the very special relations that we enjoy. Yes. I mean, you won't believe how many supporters of Ajax you have, in spite of the catastrophe of last night.
But not everyone sees it that way. We just saw a report about a critical Dutch organization, Een Ander Joods Geluid. They aren't the only organization that's very critical about Israel. We also have the former Prime Minister Dries van Acht and former Minister of Foreign Affairs Hans van den Broek. They are also turning against Israel. They aren't very keen on the affairs Holland maintains with Israel. Does criticism hurt you?
No, it doesn't hurt, but it disappoints me. Again, to a certain extent, that when you go to the extreme, you become not relevant. And Van Acht, for example, is totally not relevant. We are not even listening to him, because he is absolutely extreme anti-Israel. As we say, he doesn't let facts confuse his opinions. This is unfortunately the situation. And the other group that you mentioned, just try to find out how many members they have. I would be surprised if more than 10. But they're making a big noise. Never mind, but this is legitimate. If you read the Israeli newspapers, you'll see many that criticize harshly the government of Israel.
Do you, as Israel, listen to the current government in Holland? Because they are pretty critical as well nowadays.
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
No. I think that the government so far supported and accept Israel's right to defend itself, put the blame on the Hamas. So I don't see the level of criticism. Settlements, every government didn't. Of course, we disagree, but we respect this opinion. It is being carried by, I think, most of the European countries. But on the core issues of our of the right to defend ourselves, certainly the government today, the governments in the past, were in power with us. Let me just mention just another aspect: the fact that people are criticizing us, and yes, it's legitimate on certain issues. But when we see, for example, either criticism, flotillas, etc., when it comes to us, and no word is being uttered regarding, let's say, Syria. In Syria, in one day, you have more casualties than the entire crisis that we had in the past 8 days. And we don't see any outcry, any demonstrations, sometimes we look at it as a very cynical, anti-Israeli bashing, and therefore we cannot take it seriously, but we respect, as a democracy, that there are other opinions.
But with the upcoming criticism, are you afraid to lose one of your biggest companions in Europe?
But I don't think we're losing.
No?
Not at all. I mean, again, you want so far, and I'm following very carefully the government of the Netherlands' position, you won't see any dramatic change. On the contrary, we see support and understanding of the very special needs and challenges of the State of Israel. And right now, remember, we are in a crazy neighborhood which with ramifications which I don't have time to elaborate. But if, for example, Iran is saying that they are assisting Hamas and helping them to upgrade their rocket launching abilities, and soon they're going to go nuclear, this is a challenge that no other country in the world is facing. When the Iranians, for example, and Hamas say that their goal is to eliminate us from the earth. So these are special challenges that only Israel is facing, and we have to be strong in order to face. And I'm very pleased that the Netherlands is also behind us.
There is more. Sorry for interrupting, but there is more skeptical in the new government of Holland, and one of that is that Israel is avoiding the international law by creating settlements in the Palestinian area, in the occupied Palestinian area. Why does Israel maintain these settlements, even though it could cost them a good collaboration with Netherlands and Europe?
The issue of the settlements is one of the disputed issues that has to be solved. And therefore, we know that this is an issue that has to be solved around the negotiating table. As I mentioned before, the first interviewer, we had, there were settlements in Gaza, settlements from Gaza was removed, and the issue wasn't solved. It's very easy to put the blame on one issue, and we are saying, no, we have to deal on everything on a whole. We are not building new settlements. People do not make the difference between Jerusalem and the rest of it. Jerusalem is not a settlement. Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. We do not build in the Arab neighborhoods of Jerusalem. We are building in the Jewish neighborhood of Jerusalem. But since the status of Jerusalem wasn't yet a part of the final deal, solution, agreement, and it is unfortunately still considered to be disputed, it is considered to be a settlement. So this is a separate issue. But our policy is, yes, it is an issue that has to be solved. We want to sit down and solve it. We proved in the past that the settlement is not an obstacle for peace. Gaza is the best example.
Yes.
And that shouldn't be an excuse, to attack Israel, because at the same time I can give you so many other points that is happening on the other side, and no one is addressing them.
Okay.
Can I interrupt? Oh, sorry.
Sure.
Can I interrupt for one small question?
Please.
Referring to an ander Joods geluid, Jaap Hamburger said, Israel can't handle criticism very well. Is it true?
Not at all. Because if you'll read the Israeli newspaper, the best criticism, the harshest and the most difficult is the criticism from within. Read for Haaretz newspaper, for example. Haaretz newspaper criticizes Israel better than any organization or newspaper around the world. So we're used to it. It's part of the debate. We are democracy. And remember, democracy, it's not only freedom of press and freedom of speech, but I think the most important element in democracy is to respect the positions that you do not agree with.
Okay.
And that's the debate in Israel.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Op dit moment zit Hillary Clinton in Israël om een oplossing te zoeken voor het conflict tussen Israël en de Palestijnen. Dus opnieuw speelt Amerika een sleutelrol in het conflict. Israël en Amerika zijn onlosmakelijk met elkaar verbonden, maar hoe groot is die afhankelijkheid?
I will always support Israel's security. I will bring with me an unshakable commitment to Israel's security. An unshakable commitment to Israel's security.
Obama is op en top een pragmaticus. Dat zie je nu ook. Ja. Ik denk in zijn hart dat hij nogal pro-Palestijns is. Maar dat hij verdomd goed weet van ja, hallo, Israël is een hele belangrijke bondgenoot, die kan ik niet laten vallen. Nou, ik denk dat je kunt zeggen dat geen president kan zijn zonder steun aan Israël. Dat zit echt diep gebakken in, ik zou haast zeggen, in de Amerikaanse ziel. Je moet ook niet vergeten, dit speelt al heel lang. Hè? De Joodse staat was 11 minuten jong in 1948 en toen heeft de VS Israël al geaccepteerd als staat. Nou, weet je, Israël is afhankelijk van Amerika als je kijkt naar de steun. Vele miljarden euro's, zullen we maar even zeggen, steun per jaar. Ja, Israël is ook het enige echt democratische land in de regio. En eigenlijk een non-NATO-ally, zeg maar een niet-NAVO, want ze horen niet formeel bij de NAVO, niet-NAVO-bondgenoot. Dat betekent nogal wat, hè? Dus dan ben je echt een vriend van Amerika. Dus dat is wederzijds. Er zijn verplichtingen wederzijds. Ja, maar weet je, voor Washington is het moeilijk om meerdere redenen natuurlijk, om iets af te doen aan de steun voor Israël. Want de hele regio is natuurlijk in een soort van gisting. En het is natuurlijk ook voor een supermacht heel belangrijk om te kijken van op wie zetten we nou echt in. Nou, bij Israël weet je wat je hebt. En dan zie je vaak in de internationale politiek dat machthebbers zoals Obama, presidenten zoals Obama, ja, toch wat meer vertrouwen op de bestaande relaties. En niet al te veel willen veranderen aan de relatie met Israël. Maar ze kunnen niet zonder elkaar. Kijk, Amerika is nog steeds een supermacht. Israël is uiteraard een heel belangrijk land in het Midden-Oosten. Obama kiest nu toch ook wel heel duidelijk weer een pro-Israël koers. Dat is wat toch aan Washington kleeft, hè? Ja, een Amerikaanse president zonder steun van Israël, die wordt nog niet eens president dan. Dan kun je het echt wel schudden.
Mr. Ambassador, we've just seen Willem Post from, he's an America expert. He said that America and Israel are actually one fusion, if you may call it like that. Israel could not exist without America. How do you think about that?
Not at all. Fortunately enough, Israel is strong enough economically, socially, militarily to stand on its own. We're of course very pleased to have the United States as our ally, as our number one ally. But remember, Israel is not only that we are an independent, strong country, we are a member of the OECD, one of the 33 countries which are member, which means strong, solid economy. It's on our own. Israel is known to be the startup nation, one of the biggest number of startups every year. Per capita, we are number one in the world. Small Israel is second to the United States. More than 300 million people. Israel is just 7 point something. We are the second in absolute number in startups per year, which means strong economy with good R&D, good universities. We are innovating, we are working.
Is this because of your, really big cooperation with the United States?
Not just the United States, of course. The United States is there for collaboration in all fields, whether it's academia, whether it's trade, but also in Europe. But it's interest of all of us. When we have trade relations with the Netherlands, it's for the benefit of both countries. It's not that you do us a favor or we do you. It's meeting of interest.
So you would describe the relationship as meeting of interest with the United States?
No, with the United States even much more, because we share the same values. You have to look at values, and I think also with many countries in Europe, we share the same values. With freedom of speech, all the freedoms that you, as journalists, you know, those freedoms are not given in so many parts of the world. But for us, this is a fundamental thing. And when we are sharing the spirit of people who are building the land, who are human rights and freedoms, religion, etc. I mean, this is not the case in so many countries surrounding us. So therefore, there's a lot in common between us, the Americans, Europeans, and other countries. Also Canada, also Australia, Europe, and we have embassies in more than 100 countries. So we have good relations with all over the world. We have about 4 missions in China.
But do you feel that you need the Western countries to, maybe protect you from other?
No, we thanks God, we don't need protection. We are strong enough because we know both history and the present situation teaches us that we have to be strong and independent and be able to look after our own security. And that's exactly the case. That's why we decided to invest in a very strong army, which cost us a lot of money. It's not easy. We could have said, no, you know what, let the American or the Europeans fight for us. We are not doing it. We never asked and we never will. We want to be independent. But at the same time, of course, you don't want to be isolated in the world. And I'm glad that the like-minded countries on almost all issues see eye to eye with us the challenges that we're all facing.
As in the item we just saw, Willem Post said they do have a certain influence on each other. Would there be anything different, and if so, what would be different if America did not support Israel at all?
Well, certainly it wouldn't have been easy, but we will never reach this stage. I mean, look at the campaign, the presidential campaign which took place. It's a bipartisan thing. It is not a democratic issue. It is not a Republican issue. It's the American people. The American people that, I would say, almost there's a consensus of supporting us. And when they have to criticize, they will. It is not an en bloc, carte blanche. It is again, for the principles that we share. It's a democracy, it's a values, it's a Judeo-Christian values, and this is why we are so close.
What do you think is true about Obama supporting Palestine and Mitt Romney supporting Israel?
Both of them. This is new to me.
This was said by the Kadima party.
Kadima?
The Kadima party said on Facebook that Netanyahu was very disappointed that Mitt Romney didn't become elected because, probably he was more pro-Israel.
I don't think so. How do you feel about that? No, I think you have to take it in the context of election campaign in Israel. We're going to have elections in less than 2 months' time. And when in election campaign you try, of course, to make the most out of it. And Kadima, right now they're not doing well in the polls. So I guess this argument even didn't take off because we've seen a bipartisan approach in the United States. And the fact that President Obama, was the one with Hillary Clinton that was able to broker ceasefire in a very difficult circumstances shows that he has excellent relation with. We trust him. We wouldn't have done it if we wouldn't have trusted him. And I think it's also the interest of the state of Israel that he has good rapport with the Arab world. So, and if we wouldn't have trusted him as a friend of Israel that understands our special needs, we wouldn't have been following his advice or recommendations or lead to have a ceasefire.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Naast het conflict met de Palestijnen liggen de Israëli's ook nog in de clinch met Iran. Israël dreigt het land te bombarderen omdat zij denken dat Iran aan kernwapens werkt om hun land te vernietigen. Ondanks dat veel burgers in beide landen hopen dat het niet zover komt, doen de dreigementen over en weer het ergste vermoeden. Staat Israël op het punt een oorlog te beginnen met Iran?
Now, a new report raising the possibility that Israel is preparing to attack Iran.
Iran must not be allowed to acquire nuclear weapons.
They found nothing, no evidence of any weaponization.
Israël verdenkt Iran al jaren van het maken van kernwapens. Lida Hosseini-Nejad, journalist bij de Iraanse radiozender Zamaneh, volgt deze kwestie op de voet.
Het punt is, het is nooit een probleem tussen de bevolking zelf, bijvoorbeeld Israëliërs en Iraniërs of wat dan ook. Het is eigenlijk iets wat tussen die regeringen, speelt.
De organisatie Israel Loves Iran laat zien dat burgers uit beide landen het niet eens zijn met de dreigementen van de regimes. Via Facebook laten ze aan elkaar weten dat zij elkaar niet willen bombarderen. Maar hoe realistisch is het dat dat wel gebeurt?
Maar of het echt een oorlog zal uitbreken, dat vind ik nog steeds heel moeilijk om in te schatten.
Voor Lida is het onbegrijpelijk dat Israël Iran dreigt aan te vallen.
Zolang Israël zelf een bezetter is van een land, of tenminste die land van Palestijnen en de huizen van Palestijnen heeft afgenomen van hun. Zolang Israël zelf kernwapens bezit, hoe kan zo'n staat een ander land als Iran bedreigen dat er een aanval zou komen?
Door de band die Israël heeft met Amerika kan het binnen korte tijd tot een aanval leiden als blijkt dat Iran wel kernwapens heeft, denkt onderzoeksjournalist Seymour Hersh.
All the targets are picked, the cruise missiles are lined up. You know, it used to be I thought he was 24 hours away. It would take a day. It would take less than half a day for him to get the strike going. The package is done. It's all there. Just waiting for the yes.
Well, Mr. Ambassador, the Gaza Strip is in the news all over the time, and so it's very close watch at the moment. But how are the relations between Iran and Israel at the moment?
No relations at all. Iran is a country that is vowing to erase us from the map, to destroy the state of Israel. They are openly saying that they are developing nuclear capability in order to destroy Israel. And there's no question of settlements, there's no question of occupation. It's again the issue that we discussed earlier on about perceptions in some parts of the Arab world that we shouldn't exist. And we're talking about a country that as a country, the leadership are Holocaust deniers. It's not individuals, which is bad enough. Leaders of a country to deny the Holocaust. I think that alone tells you who we have to deal with. Therefore, unfortunately, there's no relation. They are the number one enemy of the state of Israel, but not only of the state of Israel, of the free world, because this is the country that sponsors terrorism. They are the country that openly they said Hamas, they arm Hezbollah. Hamas and Hezbollah are listed as terrorist organizations in the EU and other countries. So this is the country that we have to deal with as the international community.
Mm-hmm. So that's what what we hear from the government mostly. But what's the opinion of the people in Israel?
Oh, this is the people of Israel also. There is a consensus that Iran is an enemy, a dangerous enemy. There are different opinions. How do you go about it? Some people say we have to reach out maybe to the people. How do we, help the people topple their own government? But it's impossible because this is a dictatorship. There's different opinions of how to go about the threats of the Iranians towards Israel. But there's a full consensus that Iran is the number one threat. It's not the Palestinians. It's not anyone else in the region. It's the Iranians.
How recent is the threat coming from Iran? How recent is it?
Oh, it's already a couple of years. The minute they decided to develop the nuclear capability and at the same time, for military purposes, and at the same time are saying that they will destroy the state of Israel. It's already a question of a couple of years, which of course we're all concerned with.
And what reasons do you have to suspect that Iran may be developing nuclear weapons?
It's not us, it's the Atomic Energy Committee in Vienna. Read just the recent report that came out about a month ago, and they say that the Iranians are deceiving, Iranians are hiding and camouflaging their attempts, but they have the facts. Again, it's the Vienna Atomic Energy Committee. They are the one who's saying they are cheating the entire world. They are conniving, and therefore, and they are not complying with the inspectors.
Let's say that Iran does develop a nuclear weapon at some point. Why would they actually use it?
Why?
A nuclear weapon of all weapons.
Why that? Well, that's a very good question, but I can't take chances. Europe cannot take chances. No one can take any chances when they themselves are going to say they're going to use it. It's not that I suspect or I'm paranoid. They are saying we are going to use it and we are going to use it against Israel. By the way, it won't be just used against Israel.
Because I have Meir Dagan, the ex-chief of Mossad. He has said in an interview with CBS News Online, and I quote, that the regime in Iran is a very rational regime. No doubt that they are considering all the implications of their actions. Does that mean that once they do have a bomb, they will just send it straight away? Or will they actually think about the consequences of what such a bomb will
we're speaking rationally, but we are dealing with a regime that is not rational, and we cannot take a chance. I cannot wait and say, you know what? I think they're rational, let's wait. But suddenly they launched a missile with a nuclear and say, oops, I was wrong. Can you take a chance? Can anyone take a chance? Why President Obama? I'm the same wrong, but President Obama, he was the one who said, I will not let Iran go nuclear. Why he? because he understands, like the Europeans, that Iran going nuclear will change international affairs the way we know it. It will change things. Just think of the Iranians closing the Hormuz Straits with nuclear capability. I mean, this is a new world. Look what's going to happen to the Gulf countries, which are being threatened all the time by the Iranians. Look about if they today support Hezbollah actively, support Hamas. Imagine that one of those thousands of rockets which have been launched towards Israel would have been equipped with non-conventional capability by Iran. Just imagine what that would have created.
I understand.
Can we afford it at the free world? We cannot.
No, I understand your concerns.
Yeah, well, Israel has the right to defend itself, of course, but do you think Iran has the right as well?
Of course, if someone will attack her, they have the right. But when they are the one who are saying that we are going nuclear against decisions of the international community, and they're violating it and doing it in a very defined manner, I hope that they will be sensible enough to listen to the international community, to listen to the warning, to the very clear warning of President Obama and other like-minded countries, and not cross this line, because then, of course, it is, then they are the aggressors, and they'll have to bear the consequences.
In a way, you are already being attacked by Iran, since they are widely believed to be supplying Hamas and Hezbollah with weapons. Are you doing something about that?
We, of course, are very concerned, and therefore we're trying to make sure that Hezbollah and Hamas won't be armed with sophisticated weapons. We were not successful. That's, by the way, another myth of the siege of Gaza. There's no siege. If there would have been a siege, they wouldn't have had the thousands of rockets that they have been able to launch. But this is of great concern of us, and we are trying to do our best. We hope that, for example, the sanctions against Iran will work.
I'm going to right there, because we haven't got much time left. If you believe that Iran is developing nuclear weapons, what does it take for Israel to attack Iran? And just a short final statement.
Yeah, we feel that this is not an Israeli problem. This is a problem of the international community. This is a problem of the free world led by the United States. The United States should lead in whatever has to be done, whether sanctions, whether other options. All the options are on the table, but one thing has to be clear: Iran, we cannot afford, we, the international community, cannot afford Iran going nuclear.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Gaat het ooit rustig worden in het Midden-Oosten? Ambassadeur Haim Divon hoopt van wel. Hij hoopt dit te proberen met tikkun olam, het Israëlische spreekwoord. Met behulp van natuurlijk de bondgenoten zoals Nederland en de Verenigde Staten. Hiermee zijn we aan het einde gekomen van een zeer speciale aflevering van het Campusjournaal. Mr. Ambassador, very thank you. Ook de studenten van 2A bedanken we voor hun bijdrage. Luister morgen ook naar onze speciale radio-uitzending vanuit de Hollandse Schouwburg in Amsterdam. Hier praten we met Harry de Winter, oprichter van een ander Joods geluid. Volgende week is er weer een reguliere uitzending van het Campusjournaal. Tot dan!